في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ثم جعلناك على شريعة من الأمر فاتبعها ولا تتبع أهواء الذين لا يعلمون إنهم لن يغنوا عنك من الله شيئا وإن الظالمين بعدهم أولياء بعض والله ولي المتقين. هذا بصائر للناس وهدى ورحمة لقوم يوقنون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our fourth night in which we are looking at our series of Islam in Britain and Britain in Islam, the forthcoming decade of 2020 to 2030. In our first night, we posed a very honest question to ourselves and asked, is Islam a genuine source of goodness for Britain today? How do we prove that? We elaborated and said that whilst we accept that all faiths are genuine sources of goodness, is Islam a genuine source of change and growth in society today or not? Our second lecture, we asked ourselves about how the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, would reflect deeply upon his own community. That he would be sitting in Ghar Hira and he would be overlooking the city of Mecca, and he would ponder deeply on the questions not only of the universe and existence, but also on his community, and when he came to it, how would he bring about a change in that society? Who is it that would be with him and why? Who is it that would reject him and why? And deeply understanding the social circumstances and the ways in which a practical solution based on godliness would be able to evolve that society. We then needed to go through that exercise for our own self, and we spent a number of nights trying to reflect on what are the overarching and systemic challenges to Britain in this decade, and specifically what are the challenges to the Muslim society in Britain in this decade. Now, yesterday in our third part, we took the discussion forward and we talked about a maqasid al-sharia and how there has to be a hierarchy, a systematic prioritization of the challenges that we have, and thus when we understand that, we can then think about the priority of our responses, be it where our time and effort goes into, where our finances go into. All of that has to be systemic and not just randomized if we're going to be able to make a genuine change in society. Yesterday, we also looked at the question, what are going to be the specific challenges for the Muslim community in a post-Brexit world? Now, I know today there's been a little bit of shift in political discourse, but I still have an assumption that Brexit is going to happen. And even if it didn't happen, there is a fundamental shift in the underbelly of the tone of political discourse that really we are going to be living in a different world come October 31st, come what may. Yeah? So the question we posed yesterday is, what are our challenges and opportunities as a Muslim community? We mentioned, for example, that when we leave without a trade deal, London being the financial capital of the world, there is a huge opportunity for the Muslim community to push a genuine Islamic finance to the rest of the world, such that when it comes to the types of debt that's spiraling out of control, the way in which we spend our money, the Muslim community has a space to be able to guide that discourse, because all regulations need to be rewritten. There's going to be a space for sourcing that, even from the Muslim community. We mentioned, for example, the issue around politics and policy making, that the Muslims are going to have an extra space in a post-Brexit world. Why? Because even now we are seeing that the whole political discourse is changing. Party allegiances are changing, the way in which we are understanding our whole political infrastructure. At the moment, the whole discourse is based on Brexit. That is the mihwar, that is the pivot of political discourse. What happens after that? And we go back to a space of normality. Where do the Muslims want to be in that discourse? We also mentioned as an example that without these regulations that come to us from the EU, the food that we import is going to be of a much lower standard of quality. The Quran talks to us about halal and tayyib, not just halal. We have a standard of what we want to put into our bodies and souls. If we do food deals with places like New Zealand and the United States of America, they don't have the same regulations. The quality of food you will be putting in your own stomachs, the chemicals, the antibiotics, the carcinogens that's going to be in your body will have a long-lasting impact generationally, physically and spiritually. The Muslims have to be a driver of goodness in these spaces. We mentioned others as well. Now, the homework I gave to you, again, hands up, how many people remember the homework? Are we improving or are we about state? Where are we? Are we doing better? What do you think? Marginally better. Alhamdulillah. Khutbah about the khutbah. Right? Step by step we will improve, inshallah. So, what was the homework? You put your hand up. You can't now look down and go, oh, I don't know. I hope he doesn't pick on me in class. Right?
What else is to renumber them based on your definition of...
So not just renumber them, that you could have done that. It's brilliant if you went a step and above. But we wanted your top one, yeah? Your top one challenge to the British society in the next 10 years. And of course we needed justification behind this. And we said, look, based on the maqasid, based on our understanding of the multiple layers of challenges that we have, be they infrastructure, be they moral, and so many more, we needed to pick one so that we could actually start our entrance point into our series proper from tonight. So, let's mark the homework. So for those that did it, let's ask a few people what their biggest challenge and opportunity for Britain next year and the coming decade would be. So, who should we start with? Should we start?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that I think is sincere leadership.
Not one of them. What's the single biggest?
Sincere leadership.
Sincere leadership. Excellent. Can you just justify why that's the biggest challenge that we have in Britain?
Because at the moment, politicians are career politicians. They want to say what people want to hear. But the role of leader is to think about the country and its best interest and do it whether it's popular action or...
So we have a career politician and they say what they need to say to get elected and not caring about the actual community's needs at large. Do you agree that's a problem? I agree it's a problem. Do you consider it to be... I'm sorry, I'm doing this by public, this is democracy working at the moment. Do you agree that's the single biggest problem in the whole of Britain? You don't have to answer yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah? Brilliant, thank you. Ahsan, that's excellent.
Intolerance.
Intolerance. Are you wearing the colour red, because of being a Jeremy supporter? Is this, a little bit of subtlety coming our way? Yeah? Intolerance. Unpack it for me. What do you mean by intolerance?
I think it's across the spectrum, so it's not only religious, but it's across the whole spectrum, so whether it's cultural, religious, political, all these types of things.
Okay, so we just have intolerance, be it religious or political intolerance, maybe humanitarian intolerance of each other, right? I agree, this is a massive problem. Do you agree this is a problem? Do you agree this is the single biggest problem in Britain? Right? It's an interesting exercise to go through it, isn't it? Last one, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. I
I focused on Muslims specifically, not Britain.
Brilliant. I just want to highlight this for a second.
Yeah.
So the last couple of days, we went through that different discourse. Sometimes we talked about Britain generally. Sometimes we even talked about what is specific to the Muslim community. So now for you, the biggest issue is not necessarily what's facing Britain at large,
Right.
but specifically to us as Muslims.
Yes.
Okay.
So I went for Islamophobia and the media perception of Muslims.
Islamophobia and media perception of the Muslims. Excellent. Do you agree that's a problem? Yeah? Do you believe it's the biggest problem facing Britain? Oh, interesting. We've got two more here. I'm just going to go very quickly and then we'll be able to continue.
Biggest problem is that they want all the Muslims to go away.
Yes, okay. Do you agree that Britain wants all of Muslims to go away?
No, Muslim, every Muslim go away.
Okay, so is this the biggest problem that we have in Britain? Yeah, so this is an interesting answer. My young friend here,
I would agree with Islamophobia.
Islamophobia, and just behind you,
I'd go with appearance taunting.
you would go with?
Appearance taunting.
Can you
of
explain?
Women,
Oh, that's
of
interesting.
women covered in black cloth and women wearing hijab.
So do you mean how people treat those women?
Yeah.
Or them wearing it?
Them wearing it and the people reacting to it.
Ah, yes, very interesting. I like this answer. The bit which goes into the intolerance that was mentioned earlier. So, for my sisters, this young brother said that the biggest problem we have in Britain is intolerance to muhajjabat. Our sisters who wear hijab, or for example, tonight might be wearing black abaya, and so on. Last one, my young friend at the back, you put your hand up.
Knife crime.
Interesting. Knife crime.
Yeah.
Can I ask, do you think knife crime is a problem across Britain? Is it? I don't know, is it? Yeah? Is it the biggest problem that Britain has? Well, it's interesting because yesterday we said right to life and protection of life and security is amongst the highest of maqasid. Do you remember we mentioned the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was said?
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa
لا خير في الوطن إلا مع الأمن والسرور. That there's no value to living in a place unless that there is aman and surur, security. Brilliant, thank you very much. Now, we have a spectrum of ideas here, and I think that they are all reflective of the types of challenges that we have in Britain, and also how we want to, not just reflective of the challenges in society, but where we think we need to be able to put some of our time into and efforts into. So, before we just go forward, some of these points are so brilliant. Look at my young brother's statement. In his mind, for whatever reason, where he's getting that source information from, right? To his mind, as an example, that is the biggest problem, knife crime. So what happens when my young brother goes to school? What's the fear in his mind? You see that? A sense of security, a sense of safety, ability to feel comfortable in a place of learning, right? It affects, potentially, doesn't it? Now, if that's my young brother's biggest concern, I think he has a right to ask, what is the Muslim community doing to respond to that challenge? Right? If yesterday my young brother mentioned, you remember, he said, I think it was Ayan Ali, he mentioned global warming was the biggest challenge. Right? So the question would be, what is the Muslim community doing to be able to resolve that? So these are the types of questions we have. Now, let's think about this. And we're not going to give you the answer immediately. We're going to tease it out of us for a few minutes, inshallah, before we get there. You know, amongst scholarship, especially of sociology, anthropology, there tends to be a statement or a term that tends to be in agreement at the moment. And they say things like, there is a crisis in Western civilization. Have you heard that term? There's a crisis in Western civilization. And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because they're admitting that there's something going wrong. Right? Now, a civilization such as the West, it's built on certain premises, isn't it? Certain assumptions. For example, the assumptions might be things like science is a given epistemology. Science, you have to go back and say that we prove things empirically as a means of understanding what is right, wrong, what is truth. Correct? We also have a civilization that, in the Western society, that is rooted in certain principles. It's rooted in things like liberty. It's rooted in things like justice. It's rooted in things like freedom. It's rooted in things like equality. Now, those are brilliant foundations, aren't they, for a society to be based on. Is there anyone here that would disagree with freedom as a foundation of your thinking? Is there anyone here that would disagree with, for example, equality as a foundation of your civilization? I don't imagine. But what we have here is two essential problems. The first problem would be the hierarchy, order, and dealing with the contradictions between those principles, but also that there is a particular principle that has been removed from that Western civilization, and that is the biggest challenge, or has caused the biggest challenge to Western civilization. The crisis is based on the removal of one particular foundation. What is that foundation?
Justice.
No, we said they believe in justice, they believe in equality, they believe in freedom, they believe in liberty. These are the foundations of Western civilization. Which one root has been taken away?
Belief in
Society.
faith. Faith.
Wait, 1 second.
Society.
Society is built off these.
Faith, belief in God.
Faith, belief in God.
Right.
Come on. The most important thing in Islam is what? God.
Yes.
إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا ثُمَّ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Not the other way around. Iman comes first. The principle that has been removed in Western civilization is sanctification of certain things. And that is, for example, the sanctity of God, sanctity of prophethood, the sanctity of revelation itself. When those things are removed, you have a crisis that comes about because the other principles can no longer be tempered properly. Freedom, we agree. Freedom in what sense? Freedom to dress how you want? In the United States of America, they believe in freedom. Freedom, open carry. You can walk into any diner in certain states with an AK-47. Is that the meaning of freedom? Freedom to say whatever you want? Freedom to burn the Quran? Freedom to burn any book? Is that what's meant by freedom? If you don't have sanctity to temper freedom, if you don't have sanctity to temper equality, if you don't have sanctity to be able to temper all these other privileges and rights that are given, then all of those principles and rights go haywire because there is no grounding of them. The biggest challenge to Britain in the next 10 years is the re-establishment of faith and God in society itself. There is a whole neo-atheist movement. There is an ultra-secularist movement. There is an ultra-liberal movement. And we need to realize the effect that has on the collective psyche of a community, but also how they then take these principles and privileges and misunderstand these. Without God's presence in a society, the society cannot function properly, nor can it actually reach the fullness of its potential. The first thing that the Muslim community has to do is understand the roots of the crises of the Western civilization, which is the removal of God from it altogether. Now, let's work through this and get to that point in a few minutes' time. As in, we have to start with something and then understand how that's developed, how we've removed God from society, from the presence of society altogether. The Muslim community is going through its own crises. And the crises in some ways are very much linked to each other. You know, the Muslim community, or when I say Muslim community here, I mean Muslim civilization, or even, I would say, Islamic civilization, had a number of principles. And when those principles were removed, it also began to enter through its own crises in the Muslim civilization. Traditionally, the Muslim society was prefaced over two types of learning. Number one, grammar. Arabic grammar, or at least grammar of language. Because the idea was that if you were grounded in grammar, you could understand properly how to communicate, you could understand properly how to read and write. Number two, the Islamic civilization was predicated on geometry, learning the 13 books of Euclid, spreading these understandings. Off the back of that, off the back of things like geometry, we then be able to understand certain humanities and certain sciences. We were grounded in understanding logic, mantiq. We were grounded in understanding our metaphysics, the ideas and the rules that go beyond what we can see in the physical realm, beyond science. The entire Muslim civilization was rooted on these sciences, which led to its culmination and being that peak civilization that the rest of the world had to look to, be it for technology, be it for books, be it for any science. We all know about what was called the golden era of the Muslim civilization. This dropped for a number of reasons, and although I don't agree with everything he says, I would recommend to you people like Bernard Lewis and reading his book, What Went Wrong? What went wrong in the Muslim civilization? Why did we collapse completely during the Ottoman civilization? Point to note, we don't believe in Islam in empire, so we don't say Ottoman Empire. And even if it was an empire, we don't believe Islam is an empire. Yes? So we have to understand not to take from certain Orientalist understanding that reduces Islam to these sorts of ideas. Now, the Muslim community has all but lost these things, really. You know, if we were to sit here and have a conversation around grammar or a conversation around logic, people wouldn't want to bear it. But those things were normal, rooted in the discourse. We knew how to think through questions and answers, debates, proving things to other civilizations. We've lost that. Not only have we lost that, even the Western world has lost that. You know, if you just take a step back and think about the quality of writing, be it from Euripides or be it from Shakespeare and Mill and the poetry that this civilization had created to where we are now. Now in the Western civilization we have what's known as mumble rap. I hope most of you don't know what that is. And it's good if you don't know what that is. But you can figure it out from the two words that I've used, mumble rap. There's like a poetry that was coming from a group of people that used to write their poetry off the back of freedom from police brutality, are now writing their poetry in the words of mumble. Literally, mumble. It's a genre. It's how we reached within 50 years. The whole Western civilization is unraveling intellectually. It is not going forward. It may be going forward technologically, but we're not talking about technological advancements, military advancements. We're talking about the ability to actually understand your civilization, where you've come from, where you're going. Have you seen, I hope you haven't, have you seen some of those videos on YouTube where they go to like British youth, American youth? They'll literally show them a globe, a map of the world, to American youth and say, point, where is America on the map? Have you seen those? They point to Australia. They point to Canada. I'm not joking. Have you seen them? Yeah? Isn't it embarrassing? They ask them, what's the 3 branches of government? Tell me, who is the Vice President of the United States of America? They can't answer it. Now you laugh, but if you then translate that into what's happening in Britain now, and we talked the last few days about some of the challenges, and politicians, like you said, who are career politicians, who have the ability to literally just lie in the face of the public hasn't got the education levels to be able to navigate these lies. It's clearly a link, isn't there? Go on YouTube and just watch some of the callers that James O'Brien gets on LBC, and the way he has to just talk them through such basics, and they're still 2 years on, 3 years on, haven't figured the basics out. There's something going on here, isn't there? There's something wrong. In fact, James O'Brien himself said when he was presenting his book, How to Be Right in a World That's Gone Wrong, he was popularizing this book, and he was mentioning, he said, I realized all along, all of us, this group of journalistic elites, we would always ask people, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? And people would just come on the radio and spout their opinion and give nonsense, and that was the end of it. The moment I said, why do you believe? Not what do you believe? Why do you believe what you believe? Prove it to me. The entire thing unraveled, and that's when he became so popular. So we are going through a crisis. Now the roots of this crisis, I am going to suggest to you, is rooted in the Enlightenment period. Why? Because of the removal of God and the removal of sanctification of anything to do with religion altogether. Now here I'm going to be very critical, and I want you to think with me and be open to this constructive criticism for yourself. We've been asking you in these last few nights, be honest. Is your Islam, is your Shiism genuinely productive? Is it doing what the Quran said it's supposed to do? وَيَدَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ, to break the shackles that are on yourselves, to lift the burdens on society. إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمْ. Is it really guiding you in your life to that which is most upright? Well, it should be. If it's not the Quran's problem. It's the way in which we're inheriting and practicing this religion. Now, I ask this question to myself and to you. Why did people reject religion in the Enlightenment period? 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. Why? The answer is fairly simple. The religion that was being practiced was not yielding any benefit to them. It wasn't productive. They found positivity, honesty, growth in the human society outside of formalized religion, the way in which the religion itself was being interpreted. And so if they found more growth outside of religion, then what's the point of having religion if the religion is actually shackling you? Give you a simple example. Thomas More, this great saint, you'll remember that he was killed and martyred. Do you know what the reason he was killed and martyred for? Anyone know? He had the audacity to go against the Catholic Church. And do you know what he did? He had the Bible in English. Yeah? He was killed for this. Read it. At that time, it was banned to have the Bible in another language. Now, if you're trying to genuinely spread the faith or understand the faith, and this is where the religion is with you, are you going to accept that sort of thing as a faith from God or not? You're not, are you? You're honestly not going to find the religion worthwhile. If that's what the church is telling you, it puts to death people who want a sanctified book but in a language other than your own. Don't laugh. Muslims have been going through the same issues for centuries. Even until today, we ban books, we ban speakers, we have a lack of confidence in dealing with each other. It's no different. Now, if you understand this, that in the period of the Enlightenment, religion wasn't productive for people. They didn't find it as a means, a source of goodness, a source of growth. They actually found it a source of bereavement for them. People would actually leave the religion because they found growth elsewhere. Think about this example. The Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, set us on a trend, a number of trends, towards the human rights of individuals. Would that be a fair assumption? Think about the way in which women were treated and the way in which the Prophet ensured that they were treated. We talked about this in some depth on night 2. The Prophet began the emancipation of slaves, correct? Every time you do a kafara, free a slave. Every opportunity, free a slave. And if you have, understand the extent of the rights and the akhlaq that is upon them. You will remember that our fourth Imam, Zainul Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, would sit on the floor with his servants and eat food with them. True or not? Subhanallah. That's the level of the fourth Imam. But you know, Her Eminence, Lady Fatima al-Zahra, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha, she wouldn't just sit on the floor with her servants. She would cook the meal for her servants. This is the trend that Islam started, correct? Islam started. Tell me, is it not the Muslims still today, the Muslim countries today, that still have slavery, or not? Occupied Hijaz. We don't use the word Saudi Arabia. It doesn't exist. And it will soon not exist either. Occupied Hijaz. They continue to enslave people. What the Prophet started in that land, they decimated, spat all over until today, in order to re-emphasize their own economy. Correct or not? What's happening in Libya right now? Dubai. It is a city that on the face of it, it glistens. The underbelly of it is an absurdity, an injustice, a sickening injustice to humanity. Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, when they go there, their passports are taken from them. It is nothing less than indentured slavery. True or not? Yeah? Muslims, civilization, treating human beings the way in which they do. I just came back from Hajj, sitting there, and you've got all this religious police and these people and whatever, and then you've got all the Bangladeshis, may Allah bless them, cleaning the toilets. Just 1 year, brother. Switch it. Get these Arabs to clean the toilets, and let the Bangladeshis have a position of authority. 1 year. Put yourself in that position. The Muslim civilization that actually started a trend throughout its generations became the one that actually reversed the trend. Instead of breaking the shackles on women, which the Prophet started, it actually layered those until today. Yeah, fine, MBS, Pharaoh of today, he may have allowed women to drive, yeah? But those 3 months ago who were protesting that, they're still languishing in the dungeons. It's all just done for Western financing. You know this. Everyone knows this. Ru'ya 2030, Vision 2030. It's only there to be able to continue their monarchy. Monarchy, as if Islam is allowed a monarchy in it. Should have. Now, if you think about this, Islam, that trend of growth, of destiny towards human perfection, Muslims came in and ruined it. That Christianity that was on the trend of Jesus Christ, salamullahi alayhi, Christians came in and ruined it. Yeah? Of course, if this was the type of religion that you're being preached to, that the Prophet is telling you about women's rights, about freeing slavery, about spirituality, and the Muslim priests are coming in and doing the complete opposite, you will not want to be in this religion because you will not find it productive. At the same time, you have secularists, atheists telling you, you want liberty? I'll show you liberty. You want to end slavery? We'll end slavery for you. Tell me something. Do you remember these last 2 or 3 nights I've been asking you these honest questions? When the Prophet came and offered these people so much in their civilization, all of these people ran towards religion, didn't they? Right? Because it was productive for them. Women ran towards Islam. Black ran towards Islam. Slaves ran towards Islam. Everyone found it productive. If that is the clear logic, if the religion is no longer producing goodness for you and someone else is, you will clearly run in that direction because you're finding more goodness there. If you're a slave in the 18th century, in the 17th century, and the abolitionists are trying to give you freedom, and the Muslims are trying to reinforce your slavery, to which religion are you going to go? Be honest. These are human beings. Do you understand? Religion became unproductive. And so, in the Enlightenment era, when the challenges came round to challenging God and challenging everything about religion, of course people were going to flock in this direction. Now, you want the kicker? You want the absolute proof of this in the history of humanity? The feminist movement. I don't know how many of you have ever studied feminism, but if you know that there's maybe 3, 4 waves of feminism that have come about. The first wave of feminism, all the main authors of feminism, you know what they used to write? They would say, how can we believe in Christianity when God is the one who makes us oppressed? Is it God? No, it's the way in which the Christianity was being preached to the women. Literally, this is what they say. And on one of our lectures in this series, we're talking specifically about Islam as a resort for women, so we're going to go through it a little bit more. But if you understand, of course people left the religions because it wasn't productive for them. Now, having gone through centuries of that, we now reach the point where we are. Again, look at the way in which religion is being presented. Look at the way in which Islam is being presented. Look at the way in which Christianity is being presented. Does it have the genuine solutions to the challenges that mankind have? If yes, we need to provide them. If no, then of course people aren't going to want Islam and Christianity and Judaism as its religion. They will take the religion of secularism. They'll take the religion of humanism. They'll take the religion of atheism instead of those things. Now, the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, has 3 sunnah. 3 sunnahs. The first is his period before he announces his prophethood. The second is in the city of Mecca, and the third is in the city of Medina. Now, normally when ulama talk about the differences between Mecca and Medina, they become very reductive. They will say things like, in Mecca we have verses of aqa'id, and then in Medina we have verses of ahkam. This is correct, but there has to be more going on than just this, correct? Right? So, if you look at the Quran and the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals certain verses, you will notice that Allah gives us certain patterns and conversations and dialogues that are taking place. It allows us to reconstruct the challenges that are there. Islam and the Quran, amongst the reasons for its revelation, and this is very important to understand where we're going with this topic, one of the reasons it comes is tasheeh of aqa'id, to correct false aqa'id. So when there was inhiraf, when there was mistakes in the aqa'id of our Jewish brethren or our Christian brethren, the Quran came to be able to respond to them and tell them, you believe X, here is the response. You believe Y, here is the response. In Mecca, there were a number of challenges. The biggest challenge was polytheism. There wasn't just polytheism, there was also agnosticism. What's agnosticism? Where you're not sure. Yeah, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not a God. There was also atheism in the city of Mecca. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes them in the Quran. For example, they would say, مَا هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا نَمُوتُ وَنَحْيَا. There's nothing about this life. We die, we live. That's the end of it. And nothing destroys us إِلَّا الدَّهَرْ, except time. So eventually you'll become scattered, worm food in the grave. That's your existence. They didn't believe in an afterlife. This is the city of Ibrahim, salamullahi alayhi, father of monotheism. And the city's inhabitants no longer even believe in God at all. This was a challenge in Mecca. In Medina, the challenge wasn't disbelief. The challenge was belief. Why belief? Because Medina was the cosmopolitan, plural society of Christianity and Judaism. Not only did they have these religions, they had multiple sects of each and every one of these religions. Now what happens, as you know, even now, when we have multiple sects, they quarrel with each other. They try to disprove one another. They try to put one another down, which is not permitted in our religion. But that was what was happening in the city of Medina. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this so many times in the Quran. How the different sects of Christianity and Judaism, their priests and rabbis, they used to just make up their own scriptures with their hands and claim this is from God. الَّذِينَ يَكْتَبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ ثُمَّ قَالَ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ وَهَذَا لَيْسَ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. They would just write the books with their own hands. Say, this is from God. Allah says, this is not from God. Now people were doing that, and so people believed this is what God wanted from you. No wonder the Prophet had to come and lift the burdens that they had placed upon themselves and break the shackles that they had placed upon themselves. Now if you understand this, this tells us that within these sunan, we have to be able to understand that there are going to be these atheistic movements, and we need to be able to respond to it. And the Quran has given us the means. The Prophet gave us the means to be able to do so from the Sunnah of Mecca. And there will be false aqa'id and weak aqa'id from the examples of the city of Medina, and thus we need to be able to help. Now, we're living in a very secular world. I want to go through 2 points. Understand basics of secularism and the problem of it, and then thinking about how the Muslims need to respond to these atheistic trends, godless trends in society, such that if they were able to do it, it would help society lift itself by several notches up. This is what Britain is facing in the challenge. Secularism, it's a long conversation. We have multiple ages here, so I won't labor the point too much. Secularism believes that you should have a belief system of the basis of what you can physically, tangibly prove. Like science. Science can prove to you certain things, can't it? Science can also not prove certain things as well. The number of questions that science cannot answer. Consciousness. Science cannot explain consciousness. How there is a space which you cannot tangibly feel, which means you can also explain the soul. فَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. Help us to understand. The universe is expanding, correct? It's expanding at the speed of light. Tell me, what's it expanding into? If you can only base your belief system under what you can empirically prove, and the whole universe that you live in is expanding, well, what's it expanding into if there's nothing beyond it? What's that space? Now you realize that there are multiple existences, multiple universes, multiple dimensions. Don't tell me that there can't be one dimension of heaven and hell beyond your ability to fathom what you can currently fathom. Now, when secularism says that we can only believe in that which we can touch and quantify and qualify in front of us, it also means that it can't believe in anything that you cannot touch, anything you cannot quantify and qualify. Now, as a result of this, when you remove God and there's de-sanctification of certain things, as we said earlier on, you have all of these great principles of liberty and freedom and justice and equality, but what is the tempering of those things? Now, the challenge that we have now, as a result of this ultra-secularization and the removal of God, also becomes the removal of sanctification and the removal of certain principles. In Latin, the root word for secular means the here and the now. You can only believe in what is present in the here and the now. Everything in history, it doesn't count. All the tradition, all the values that you bring has no benefit to you. What happens now when you want to build yourself a society off the back of strong family principles? Family has no value. It's already what is in the here and now. What happens when you want to see the understanding of evil? All it becomes is politicized. It becomes a power battle. So now when we have 3.7 million children living in this country in extreme poverty, because all there is political discourse, it ends up being, yeah, but this is my political spectrum, and because my politics tells me this is how government should be, how economics should be, 3.7 million children living in poverty is no longer wrong and evil. It's just a state of play. It's just something that needs to be there. This is a challenge for us. Now, what happens when you remove God and you remove the idea of any type of potential being held to account by a higher authority? What happens to the human being? Think about that question deeply. If now, you all heard of that film, The Purge, right? You just have one day to just go wild. Imagine you have a lifetime to go wild. Na'udhu billah. What happens to you? What happens if you are Donald Trump and you basically believe that you are God? Ana rabbukum wal a'la. Didn't the Pharaoh say this? Are you telling me really that Donald Trump isn't a ta'weel of this, isn't a real archetype, a manifestation of that type of thing today? He actually said it the other day, didn't he? He said, I am the chosen one. Didn't he? Did you hear that? Yeah. Did you hear it? Yeah. I allowed you to make notes on your phone, but if you want to Google that later, you can for yourself. He actually said, I'm the chosen one. The Quran says, no. ثُمَّ اجْتَبَاهُمْ. No. We choose the chosen ones. You people don't get to choose the chosen ones. So, when you understand this, and you have these sorts of people who can't see beyond, and they only believe in the 70 years that they have here, they are willing to destroy any civilization. They're willing to destroy the environment. They're willing to destroy and massacre human beings, so long as they and their posterity remain in power and wealth and authority. If you imagine a society like that, society can very easily break down. Be it the atheistic one that removes God altogether, or the Christian one, or the Judaic one, or even the Islamic one that doesn't genuinely put God at the helm of what it does. Let me give you an example. This is very important to understand how much civilization, Western civilization, needs God at the moment. I don't know how much you follow global politics or how much you follow some of these global events. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories now, and I want you to only focus on one thing. How much these people need God. Just that. A few years ago, there was a report in BBC, and you can still research this until today. There's a town in Mexico that came to notoriety, became popular because it had lost every single police officer. The town, like 100,000 people strong. How many people are in Leeds? Quarter of a million? Let's just say. Huh? 800,000. It's bigger than I expected. Okay, so I'm just going to use Milton Keynes from where I'm from. Same as Manchester. Really? Okay. So, now, think about this. There's a town, 100,000 people. Yeah? Imagine if your town or your city, 100,000 people, quarter of a million people, it didn't have a single police officer. What would happen? Be honest, what would happen? Crime. What else? I mean, what types of crime? Murder, rape, drugs, violence, right? Imagine you could not get hold of, there's no police officer. I know it's difficult to imagine, but just be real. Imagine there's no police officer in your city. Can you imagine the state of chaos that would be present? This town came to notoriety a couple of years back because every police officer had either been killed, kidnapped, or left the force due to drug lord violence, gang violence in that town. You know why it came to notoriety? Because the last police officer made a statement. The last. You know what? She said. Allah bless her. You know what she said? I will not leave my city unguarded. Even if it means I have to be killed to bring about defense and justice in this town, I will do so. She was the last police officer. You know what happened to her? None of us do. The reason why the report became world famous is because one day she just disappeared again, like other police officers. Until today, we have never found her body. Just imagine what that society is like. You know, I read only a couple of weeks back when we were in Hajj, I think I was telling maybe this story in Hajj with Rasul and others. A couple of weeks back I read in Mexico, you know, because there are so many kidnappings of young men and young girls, either because of, you know, drug violence or because of, ransom money. Mothers, they have now started an independent group where they try to find out where their children are buried because even the police can't help them. You know what they do? They pay to get tips as to where their children may be buried, and they go out themselves with shovels and dig up the corpses of their buried children. This is the world that we live in. If you're living in India as a woman today, the rape culture that exists, or in Pakistan, or even in the United States of America, statistically, according to the United Nations, Western countries actually have far more violence against women than even other countries. Now that may be because of recordings are different, but understand that when we remove God, sanctity, and authority, and the knowledge that Allah is watching, He is present, you will be taken to account, and on the day of judgment, every atom's weight worth of good you have done, you will be shown it. And every atom's weight worth of evil you have done, you will also be shown it, and then take an account of it. if you remove all of this, or your aqa'id is deficient in understanding it. For example, like today, many of our Christian brethren, they will end up saying that so long as I believe in Jesus Christ, Jesus is going to do away with all of my sins. Or sometimes even Shia, they will end up saying things like, if I just cry over Abu Abdullah Hussein, I no longer need to pray my salah. All of my sins are going to be wiped off. If you have a very dysfunctional aqa'id, or you take God out of the equation altogether, understand what happens to your society over a period of time. The biggest thing that the Muslim community can do for Britons, health, spiritual health, its intellectual health, its social order, is help to re-establish God in it. The Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, has an amazing hadith. He says, يحمل هذا العلم في كل قرن عدوله. Righteous, upstanding people will uphold the knowledge, this knowledge of God and Islam in every era, in every century. They will push back against those who do tahrif and those who are falsifiers of knowledge. Now think about this. In an era where God is generally present in the thinking of society, of course, that type of hadith often means the ulama, right? They're going to uphold this knowledge. يحمل هذا العلم. But in an era where now we desanctify these spaces, where everyone's opinion is equal, where we all get access to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and make our own opinions and say what we want about God, because freedom of speech is everywhere and because there's nothing left that's sanctified. يَحْمِلُونَ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ doesn't just mean the ulama of our community. It doesn't just mean the scholars of our community. We are all responsible to uphold the knowledge in this era. In an era where everyone's voice is as equal as everyone else's, and there's no authority, when there's authority, the ilm comes from the authority. When there is a lack of authority and a decentralization of knowledge, it puts it upon all of us to be able to re-establish God. The problem we have, this is my concluding statement for tonight, is that often the Muslim community is the impediment and not the solution to that knowledge. We are the ones that block people from God. Woe be upon the person who blocks someone from God. Can you imagine being on the day of judgment and God inquires of me and you? Say, I'm the one who put this man off Islam. I am the one who put this woman off Islam. Hudayfa al-Yamani, one of the great companions of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam from Yemen, you know what he used to say? I don't know whether this is a hadith from Imam alayhi salam or it's his statement, but he says it, so he might have got it from an Imam Ma'soom. Hudayfa al-Yamani says, at the end of time, the Muslims will be like a giant rock in a river. They won't let people drink from their water. The Muslims at the end of time will be like a giant rock in a river. The rock stops the flow of the water. Don't be that person. Don't be the person who blocks someone from reaching God. These people need God. They need genuine understanding of God. These people in Britain, these people in France, these people in America, these people in India, these people in Mexico, they need God in their society urgently, desperately. And it has to be the Muslims that do the tasheeh of the aqa'id for those who need it, and do the spreading of God's name and message for those who need it. You and I have to uphold that understanding. On the day of Arafah, Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Has his dua of Arafah. متى غبت حتى تحتاج الدليل. When were you absent such that I needed a dalil for you? Is this very same Hussein ibn Ali who would stand in front of those and try to get them, to shake them out of the desperate situation that they found themselves in. On the afternoon of the 10th of Muharram, just before Aba Abdullah alayhi salam is about to be martyred, he stands in front of the Yazidin army and he says to them, if you do not believe in God, and you do not believe in the day of judgment, you do not believe in the hereafter, then at least be free human beings. Think about what you're doing. You're about to massacre the grandson of Rasulullah, your own messenger. The whole message was rooted in waking them up to God. Tonight, we commemorate the martyrdom of Hazrat Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. This is an individual who at one moment was so lost that his eternity was at stake. And only a few minutes later, till today, and forevermore, and until the end of time, we will recount his name as amongst those who are the greatest human beings to have ever lived. Just a little bit of knowledge, just a little bit of awakening. This is where you and I can reach and help others reach. Were there not Christians in the army of Hussein ibn Ali? Yes. Hur was a commander of one of the battalions of Yazid's army. When Aba Abdullah alayhi salam arrived into the lands of Karbala, this was because Hur had forced him to not be able to reach his intended destination of Kufa, nor allowed him to be able to retreat, nor allowed him to be able to go to any other land within the world. He says, I want to go to Hind. Let me go far. I'm not here for a war. When the Imam on his horse tries to move away from Hur, Hur grabs the reins of his horse, pulling him back. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam turns to him and says, "O Hur, may your mother weep over you for this action." Hur responds by saying, had your mother been any other than Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayha, I would have said the same to you as well. Can you see when people know goodness? They understand it, it's in front of them, but sometimes there is a need for a shaking and an awakening to them. We are to be that Hussein to every horror that exists in the world. We are told in the books of commentary and Maktal that Hur and his relationship to the Imam is very similar to other martyrs in one particular way. That eventually when Hur was to throw himself at the feet of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, he would say, Halli min tawbah. Has my repentance been accepted? Is there any way for my repentance to be accepted? And the Imam would respond, Tallahi, indeed by Allah you have been forgiven. This same sort of event happened only a few weeks later. It is said as the companions who have been taken, the women and children who have been taken, who have been shackled, they have been forced to walk from city to city, 20 cities being paraded in front of the eyes of the Ummah, in front of the eyes of the Christians and the Jews, in front of the eyes of the men, in front of those who would wish to sell them as slaves. one of those came to As-Sajjad alayhi salam. Imam As-Sajjad was shackled. And as he was shackled, this man came and abused him and said, congratulations be upon the governor who has managed to put you in this situation. Imam As-Sajjad alayhi salam, weak as he was, in the situation where he is still bleeding from his head because they have placed an iron which has spikes on it in his head, when he is shackled such that he cannot even lift his arms up. Do you know what Imam As-Sajjad alayhi salam responds with? He says, have you read the Quran? The man responds and says, I am Hafiz of Quran. He says, tell me, have you read the verse, for example, that says that you are to love Ahl al-Bayt? Have you read that verse in which says, La as'alukum alayhi ajran illa al-muwaddata fil qurba? He says, yes, I have. He says, tell me, have you read this verse? He says, yes, I have. Have you read this verse? After 3 verses, he says, each and every one of those verses were revealed about us, Ahl al-Bayt. This companion, distraught at the realization of what he has done, tears at his collar, throws his turban down, begs forgiveness of Imam As-Sajjad, and says to him, "O my Imam As-Sajjad, O Zayn al-Abidin Ali ibn al-Hussein, tell me, halli min tawbah?" To which the Imam says, "Tallahi, I swear by Allah, you have been forgiven." Immediately that man runs into the court of Yazid and begins to say to him, "How dare you have done what you have done? How dare you enchain and enslave the family of the Prophet of Allah?" And immediately is granted martyrdom. The fact that he had this statement, it is the same statement that Hur also said in front of Imam al-Hussein. The narration says that inside his tent, Hur is pacing up and down, up and down. One of the companions of Hur says to him inside the Yazidin army, he says, "Oh Hur, you are known to be the bravest of all of us, but I see you trembling and shaking. Are you afraid of the battle that is to come this afternoon?" He says, "By God, I am not afraid of dying, but what I am afraid of is dying in a way in which is in opposition to Husayn ibn Ali. It is as if that I stand here between heaven and hell. How will I stand before Allah if I make this wrong decision?" We are told by our dhakireen at this moment, he calls his son, he calls his slave, he tells his son and slave, "I want you to bind me, I want you to put a blindfold on me, and I want you to lead me towards the camp of Husayn ibn Ali." The narration says that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam turns around to his companions and says, "Go out, there is someone that you need to welcome." They go out and they see that it is Hur who is walking as if he is the slave, walking towards the Imam in a way in which he is penitent and asking for forgiveness. They take him into the tent. He throws himself at the feet of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. "Halli min tawbah, is there any way? Has my repentance been accepted?" "Tallahi, I swear by Allah, Allah has accepted your repentance." I want you to imagine right now, imagine what it must have been like in the camp of Sayyida Zainab. These are the women and children that know what is about to happen to their brother, to their father, to their uncle Imam al-Hussein. Can you imagine the hope that it gave when the commander of the Yazidin army was to come and switch sides? I wonder, I reflect, can you imagine Sayyidah Ruqayya, Sakina, this 4-year-old child? I wonder if she went up towards her and said, "Oh Hur, did you bring any water with you? My baby brother, Ali al-Asghar, his eyes have sunken into the back of his head. Oh my dear man, is it possible for you to bring a sip of water for my beloved Muhammad al-Baqir? He is only 4 years old. Oh Hur, did you bring any water with you for my beloved father Husayn ibn Ali?" You can imagine what Sayyida Ruqayya and Sakina must have been going through in these moments. We are told that Hur wanted to be amongst the first of the martyrs, saying to Imam, "It is my fault that I have brought you the way I have brought you. I am the one who has cut off your water for 3 days and 3 nights. I am the reason why your children are crying out, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. Will you allow me to go in front of the enemy?" He goes out in front of the enemy. He calls out to them and says, I am Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. I was your commander a few minutes ago. I have awoken to my senses. I am now standing in defiance of you and Yazid, and in defense of the grandson of Rasulullah, the son of Fatima al-Zahra. I implore you not to do what you are about to do. They fired arrows at Hur. At that moment, Hur tells his slave and his son, go ahead with me, fight, and they die. Hur goes in towards the battlefield. He too is struck down bravely. It is said at that moment, he calls out, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Come to my aid, O Aba Abdullah. Hussein comes towards him. He sees Hur lying in a pool of his own blood. His head has been struck by a sword. His head has been cut open by that blow. It is said that Imam places his head upon his own lap. He begins to take out a handkerchief and he begins to wrap it around the head of Hur. We are told that when there was water filling the grave of Hur and they needed to go and re-dig the grave and bury him again, that they saw this on his forehead. As they lifted that handkerchief, his head began to bleed as fresh as it was 1400 years ago. As he places his hand upon the head of Hur, he looks at him in the eyes. He says, Oh Hur, indeed you are Hur the way in which your mother named you. You are free the way in which your mother named you. You can imagine at this moment, as the Imam returns back towards the tents, bringing the body of Hur. At this moment the children would come out and they would know that this is the way in which the Yazidin army even treats one of its own former members. They begin to realize what is going to happen to them and the way in which they are going to treat Akbar and Abbas and Qasim and Hussein and Zainab and Kulthum. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إن لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If we are to pass away from this world before his coming, Ya Allah, raise us from our graves so that we can partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We ask you, Ya Allah, we have come here on these nights to mourn Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Allow us to perform his ziyarah fi dunya wal akhirah. Grant us the highest of reward and make sure that we are on his path of islah fi ummati jaddihi. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to make Britain and British society a God-centric society, enlivened with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us in all of our endeavors. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Matim Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.